At the 72 Worldcon, Harlan gave a talk about professionalism in which he said that one reader is the equal of 10 fans. How do you feel about fandom?
It's a lot of fun. I say one fan equals 100 readers. I think Harlan's completely wrong. I think fandom is there are about 5 to 25,000 fans in the United States. By these, I mean, in fact, they go to the heavy readers who buy the magazines. You have to be a fan to buy the magazines. They are an in-group type thing now. And that's where the breakup comes, and above 30,000, you're going into readers. It's a jolly hobby. I was a fan as a kid. I'm a card-carrying member of First Fandom. I attended the first World Science Fishing Convention back in 1939. I enjoy going to conventions. I wish fans would keep on doing it. I think it has no other value. There was a time when writers came out of fandom. As of now, writers come out of the woodwork. Never heard of fandom. Good science fiction writers like Tom Dish, Chip Delane, never heard of fandom. Brian Orbis, so they became professionals. To me, the value of fandom is they enjoy it, let them do it as a hobby for themselves. Great, they're having a nice time. I enjoy it by going to conventions where I can meet people who read my books and talk about them, meet my peer group, meet other writers, just generally have a good time, get a little jazzed up. It's the only form of fiction can do this. You don't hear Western conventions or love confessions. Oh, I read your last one about the girl who died in childhood. I loved it very much. No, you don't hear this kind of nonsense. But science fiction gives some feedback. A writer needs feedback of some kind. Only in science fiction do you get it. Fandom must live. If only to keep me happy.
That is, well, who is that, Mel?
Who is that? That wasn't Clayton Ward, was it? No, I don't think it was Clayton Ward. That was Harry Harrison.
That's right.
Who's going to be our guest on September 7th, and we're going to talk about West of Eden.
And I chose that cut because we have been saying some cruel things about fandom over the last few weeks. I decided I needed to hear the other side.
Yeah.
So that will be that is Harry Harrison. Not will be, it is. And he will be on the show in 3 weeks.
Yeah.
3 weeks.
5.
All right. As long as you've got it, just roll the next band. Just roll the next band, Bert.
Is that Alexander's Ragtime Band there?
They say, well, how do you think these up? And I said, well, it takes a little time, but you manage to think them up. Well, how do you do it? I say, well, you just think hard. And they cannot get the idea that this is the product of an imagination. Okay, so something triggers me off, but I'll be damned if I can remember what on the occasions. After all, I've been writing for 25 years, and it becomes sort of instinctive. You keep getting input. You retrieve it when you need it, and you never know what's going to turn up that's necessary. Articles you read in newspapers on the train or the bus, or even the silly articles you can get in the airplane magazines.
It's all data.
It's all data.
It goes in there and it churns around.
And you watch people. I love to get to an airport ahead of time and just simply look at people and watch and what if them. And try to figure out, you can feel tension. And every now and then you get sitting next to somebody and you know they're tensed up about something. And then they'll be talking to their companions and you kind of figure out, well, what brought about this whole situation? And this is a what if, and this is grist to the writer's mill. That's where I get my ideas, from observation.
That's the Dragon Lady.
Yes, it certainly is. Terry and the Pirates. Whatever happened to them?
Anne McCaffrey.
Anne McCaffrey herself.
She was on the show for the first time back in about 74 or so.
How many books had she had out by then?
Oh, I think she had, of the Pern stories, maybe 3, I think. Maybe 4.
Huh.
All right, Bert, skip the next, skip the next band. In fact, skip the next 2 bands. Go to the 3rd band. That would be band number 9.
Number 9?
Yeah.
Number 9?
We're going to play a special one. This is for Mel.
This is for Mel?
This is for Mel, yeah. We're even going to get to your voice, by the way, later on.
Yeah, I'll try.
Real good.
I'll charge you royalties. Yeah? 10% of
Don't even think about it.
Oh, okay.
Let's see, isn't it right?
I can think about it.
No, not a good idea.
No?
No. All right, so let's see, we'll go to that band next. Now, I remember that thing I read last week from Locus, where McCaffrey and Diane Duane are working together on an animated version of the Dragon.
And it occurred to me that Diane Duane is currently in Pennsylvania someplace.
She was. She may be in Ireland.
I guess so. Otherwise, their phone bills are going to be hideous.
Forget it. You know, English TNT.
Yeah. Please continue.
I was thinking about that. You know, remember what color Diane Duane has hair?
Very, very blonde. Light blonde.
I think we'll make a real interesting pair, those two. Interesting just to sort of rub them together to see what sparks fly up.
They look like they're related. Their hair is similar, isn't it?
No, McCaffrey has red hair.
Is it red? Remember it being also pretty light. I don't know. Anyway, we'll see.
All right, okay. We got this one? Okay, Bert, roll.
Well, I got into it by accident. I started out to be a naval officer. I wrote a story intended for a short story contest conducted by Wonder Tales. The prize was $50. And I looked at this story and I sent it off to Astounding instead. They sent me $70 for it, and I took a look at that check. Now, this was in the middle of the Depression. $70 was a lot of money then. Call it the equivalent of $700 now. It had taken me 4 days to write that story, and here was this check, equivalent to $700 now. And I said, how long?
And that was done at a convention by a fan named Jason Roberts, who was a listener of this show. And he said, I'm going to this convention. Heinlein is going to be there. Do you want me to interview him?
And you said, oh, he's on the list. I want my right one.
Let me think, I said. I thought I've said.
Why don't we, can we go up there and kidnap him and put him in a mink-lined room and just drag him on down here?
Don't you remember us hearing somebody about the electric fences? And, no, I don't think we want to do that.
We could go
if
up
he
there.
comes, I'd sure as hell
wouldn't that be
give
neat?
my left any
ventricle,
portion of my body.
portion of your left
right.
body. Yeah, and he can come on and talk about whatever he wants, you know, sports or anything. Blood is good. Yeah. You can talk
what was that great line? Robert Heinlein is the only science fiction writer taking new blood out of the field.
That's very funny.
Okay, Bert, skip the next cut, and go to cut number 11.
Yeah, Robert Heinlein, gee. I sure hope his new book is good. I read the first couple of pages of it, and that seemed pretty good. Hard to get a sense of a novel from a couple of pages. But
well, I mean, look at the title, Job, or as I heard it one day, Job. Comedy of Justice.
Comedy of Justice.
Job, I mean, right away, you're grabbed by at least I am. I'm grabbed by the title. No question about it. I want to know more.
That's right.
And by God, we will.
I certainly hope so, Stanley.
Okay, now, you got that cute? All right, hang on a second. One of the things that people have commented on, more or less vociferously, is the fact that this is a real loose show. I mean, this is not your planned show.
Diuretic is what it is.
Good. Well, one night, I had John and B. Joe Trimble in the studio.
Uh-huh.
And all of a sudden, Sherry Gottlieb walks in with this guest. And they sat down. I didn't know this was going to happen. They walked in that door, sat down, and we heard...
You may be wondering if I have an incredible new plot, yes.
I am indeed. Would you care to straighten me out?
Certainly.
Okay.
Okay, well now this plot, you see, which is going to make us all a lot of heavy bread, all takes place in the men's room at the Standard Station, you see. Because this is not one of these things where you pay to get into the toilet. Is that the way it is now? I never figured
Some,
it out.
yes.
You have to pay to get out. You see, actually have to pay to get out of the men's room, and it takes a 20-cent piece to get out. See, and there are very few of those around. You don't discover this till you go into the men's room and try to get out. And then you find you have no 20-cent piece, so you live the rest of your life in the men's room. And they have dispensers that dispense soup and combs, and what else do you need besides soup and combs? And you can pay for those because those take quarters or dimes, and when you run out of those, they'll take credit cards. But the door will only take 20 cents. And you may be wondering at this moment, what happens when somebody else comes in? Can't you sneak out?
Right.
And it occurred to me that that's probably a federal bust, like when you sneak into the movies backward, because you're probably not paying your taxes when you sneak out there, because they get a cut, so they send you up, so you don't want to do that. So you'd rather live in the men's room than be sent up. And these are your two choices, which sort of boils down what life is all about, doesn't it, really? Living in the men's room at the Standard Station or going to prison. Anyway,
and
finally,
sometimes it's hard to tell them apart.
the guy buys enough combs to file something down into the shape of a 20-cent piece, and he finally gets out. And then he tells the police, you know, that he's been in there for 35 or 40 years, you see. I haven't got all the details worked out. I hope somebody in the audience could tell me how they...
Let's go back to the part where you said we make a lot of heavy bread. How?
Well, that's the part I thought the audience could explain. That's the part I
okay,
haven't worked
all
out.
right.
Well, anyway, there was one point. Somebody said to me, well, wouldn't there be an awful lot of people in the men's room at the Standard Station after a while, because very few of us have 20-cent pieces? And I said, right. And they build a station with very small pumps and very large men's room. See, they know where the heavy bread is. You see, actually, there used to be a 20-cent piece.
There did.
There used to be what they call fractional currency. There were half dimes, 2-cent pieces, 3-cent pieces, and things like that. So you could legally actually make a machine that only took 20-cent pieces, I guess.
Yeah, but you'd have to be a coin collector. You'd be rich because if you were a coin collector, you just collect one 20-cent piece and sell it for, yeah, I'll say it, a mint.
I could make a guess. I don't really.
Go ahead,
The
make a
voice
guess.
is not familiar,
Go ahead.
but just from the subject matter, I would guess Philip K. Dick.
And you would be right.
Would I really?
Welcome to Science Fiction Trivial Pursuit. You're
Hey,
absolutely right.
That's not bad.
Yes.
I knew guys like that who had what small
Ideas
pumps
for-
and large men's rooms. Yeah, I've known people like that. Philip K. G. I didn't realize that he'd been on the show.
Oh, yes. In fact, a little later, we'll be playing excerpts from an interview that I did with him that Bert and I recorded down at his home.
Oh, in wherever it was,
Santa Ana.
Santa Ana. Yeah.
Yeah, but anyway, he just walked in, just blew everybody right out.
Sure.
I did not know he was coming.
Sure made John
And
and
he sat
Bijo.
down and sort of, well, they just loved it a lot.
Well,
you know.
yes.
Anyway,
Must have
that
been
was
years ago.
It was
Long
to be
before my
precise.
time.
It was March the 23rd, 1973.
1973. Well, that's,
Right.
I think I was in San Francisco during that period.
Okay, now for the next cut, we'll play the next band, Bert. This is considerably different. It's a different writer. This happened in February of 1973, and you will hear a sort of a discussion between this writer and Mitchell Harding. I don't think I say anything in this
Harding.
one, but very interesting. All right, let's have a change of pace here.
Okay.
I worked for AVCO full-time for about a dozen years, and the evolution of people's attitudes about science fiction from 1960 to 1971 was quite revealing. Well, in the early 60s, I would run into a fair number of people who, after they had known me for quite a while, would admit that they did read things like Analog, and you always open the bottom drawer of their desk and paw around under some charts and graphs and pull out a couple copies of a science fiction magazine or a paperback novel. By 1970, it was often very useful to announce myself as a science fiction writer right up front, so that we could talk about new ideas and new things and break the ice very quickly.
Do you think that science fiction has had an influence directly?
An enormous influence. An enormous influence. But not in any specific prediction or idea.
Mm-hmm.
But the influence is basically in showing people that the world is made of changes, and that change is not something to be feared, it's something to be desired. And you have almost an infinite variety of possibilities ahead of you in the future. And one of the things that you want to do is try to work toward the kinds of changes that are desirable in your view.
Yes, although I'm always conscious of the sources of the power in this culture, and the man who has one goal for his technology may not have the same goal you would have.
Exactly right. But unless you know what's possible, you can't make a realistic goal at all, and you can't understand what the other guy is shooting for.
That's certainly true.
The most important thing in guiding any step you take is knowledge. In the final analysis, knowledge is the only real wealth that the human race has. Everything else stems from it. And people who take a look at a few pounds of rocks brought back from the moon and say, we spent $26 billion for that? Well, no, they spent $26 billion for a number of things, but it all boils down to an increase in mankind's knowledge, an increase in our ability to understand and eventually to manipulate or live in a much wider world than we had before.
Yes, that opens the other side of it. Not so much the increase in knowledge, but also the change in man's estimation of himself, of his self-image.
Mm-hmm.
Man, the person who went to the moon, is a different man than the person who hasn't gone or
That's
didn't
right.
want to go.
Perhaps the most important effect of reaching the moon has been people suddenly realizing the real power of modern technology. How many times have you heard someone say, by God, if we can go to the moon, why can't we get a bus, to go across town? And this has had, I think, an effect already in the American political scene, and it's going to have a much stronger effect as time goes on.
You know, the chance that we would have spent that $27 billion to solve the problems of poverty was pretty small, but perhaps because we went to the moon, and then those people you talk about are beginning to say, why can't we solve it because we went to the moon, may in the long run justify the $27 billion on that account,
Well,
if that's not too abstract an argument.
Well, I always get a slight chuckle out of people who say, you know, why did we spend that money on space program? Why didn't we spend it on Earth? And I get a flash of these people seeing in their mind's eye our Apollo astronauts taking big piles of greenbacks out of the lunar module and depositing them on the moon.
That's not my argument.
That money was spent on Earth, and it alleviated a lot of poverty. In fact, you can trace our current economic recession right back to the moment when the space program began to wind down.
You feel that there's a cause, relationship
I think
there?
it's not the entire cause, but it's part of it. Because the money spent in the space program, as I think many people in Southern California should know full well, had a terrific multiplier effect in the economy. A dollar given to an engineer at North American Rockwell, for example, was spent many, many times for many, many things. And the butcher, the baker, and the candlestick maker all got into the act. You know, getting to the moon was a simple engineering problem. Simple in the sense that there weren't very many non-engineering complexities involved. There were no real estate rights to worry about. There's no right of way to buy out.
Or Indians to dispossess.
Yes, or urban areas to bulldoze. Taking that same amount of money and producing a real effect on the disadvantaged peoples, on the ghetto peoples, is something that we have not yet learned how to do. You know, we know how to build rockets. That's easy. How to help people grow is a difficult problem.
Well, it is a matter of image, I'm sure. The person in the ghetto could find a way to keep the surface of his life clean and painted and whatever. The degradation that comes from poverty isn't so much physical ugliness around him as it is the depths of the awareness within himself that there is no place for him, nowhere for him to go. And doing it for him is perhaps the big mistake that's been made. The government says we've got to help these people do something without asking what it is they really want to do in the first place, what their goals are.
Well, this is something that I think science fiction has failed to examine, and I would like to see stories in analog exactly on this subject. We had one from a young writer from the South Bronx, which is a pretty nasty ghetto area in Manhattan, or in the Bronx, actually, in New York. But I would like to see other people, both black and white, and Chicano and Indian, and all the people who have something to say on this subject in a science fiction vein express themselves. And I'd like to use analog to take a look at what we can do to solve these problems.
They don't want no Jews in the magazine?
They want them. They just don't think they want them.
Oh, okay. That was a toughie.
He pulled that one out, friends. I'll tell you, he was going. I gave him a clue, and he finally worked it out.
I finally worked it out, and I think as soon as he would have said the stories we're looking for in analog, I think that would have given it away.
Yeah.
Because I know John Campbell's been dead for some years.
1971.
1970. You could have had him on the show.
I could
You
have,
could
but
have.
no, I couldn't.
He never came to the Los
Started the
Angeles.
show in 72.
Was that so? 72. Oh, okay. Well, I figured out who it was. It's Ben Bova.
Ben Bova is right.
Who is the source of one of the funniest terrible jokes? I think it was a Gardner Dozois joke.
Why is Ben Bova the source of it?
Well, no, because because the joke is how does the universe? And then the last line of the story is, and then the Ben went Bova. See, it's all his fault. If he hadn't had that name, it's all true.
All right, okay. We're going to play the next cut. The next cut, because it is listed here on my notes as Sexy SF.
Sexy SF?
I knew you'd be hooked. Bert?
Push the button, Max.
Most of the controversies about sex in science fiction stem from a rather small minority of science fiction readers. Now, they have a perfectly valid point. If they feel that they don't want to read stories that have any references to sex in them at all, that's fine. That's their point of view, and they're entitled to it. I will not buy a story because it has a sex scene in it. I will not turn down a story because it has a sex scene in it. I'll buy science fiction stories that I enjoy reading. And I have a surefire test. I read them at 6 in the morning. And if they keep me awake, they're good.
You know, he wrote, that's Ben Bova again.
Yes, right.
And he wrote a story that I think was in ADV, in Again Dangerous Visions. I don't remember the title, but Harlan presented it as the first love and free fall short story where they actually discussed it. I remember reading that story. It was an interesting story.
Yeah, right. How to do it in free fall.
How to do it in free fall. And then there's also a famous limerick called, which starts, a spaceman made love in free fall.
Do you know the rest of it?
I think the second line is with a beautiful space-suited doll. And the rest of it is either I don't remember it.
Well, I'm going to have to finish it right now. Let's
if
see.
I did remember it, it's too vile to say on the air. Something about being
positions
screwed
they
to
found could not be done on the ground, and even in space they appall.
That's not bad. Actually, that's pretty good. I don't think that's the original though, but that's pretty good.
Of course, it's not the original. I just made up those 3 lines. Okay.
Laugh while you can, Monkey Boy.
The next band is from another editor. I won't tell you who it is, but it shouldn't take you very long to find out.
Okay.
This interview was done in 1974, and this editor, who's also a writer, is talking about how stories get bought.
Okay.
Stories often get bought for reasons that are not wholly related to merit, or they get turned down for similar reasons.
I can think of one reason why you accept them. You've got exactly that amount of space.
Well, that, or you need, if you're doing a science fiction magazine, you may have an issue that has 4 or 5 pretty good stories in it, but nobody ever heard of any of the writers. So if somebody with an established name, with a coterie following, turns up with a story, even if you don't like the story a lot, you may buy it just to put the name on the cover. It's not a sensible thing to do in literary terms, but in commercial terms, it's kind of important.
If the magazine doesn't sell, it doesn't matter who you publish. They're not read.
That's right. Although it's really an open question how much any individual science fiction writer's name means in terms of selling a collection or a magazine. In terms of selling his own book, it makes some difference, but I remember I edited Galaxy and If for about 10 years, and I spent a long time trying to analyze the effect of things I put on the cover on the market, and I have yet to find out any solid answers. The only author whose name seemed to make any difference was A.E. Van Vogt.
More so than Heinlein?
More so than Heinlein, Bradbury, Clark, Asimov, you name it.
Why?
I don't know why, but when I published a story by Van Vogt, I could expect a perceptible change, favorable change in the sales of that issue. Not big, not enough to make us go out and float a new stock issue or double a print order, but an encouraging sign. I couldn't find that with any other writer, including me.
Maybe he has a large family, I don't know.
Well, I guess possibly one reason was at the time that I began publishing Van Vogt in If, I think it was. He had not been writing for some years, so it was all new. But I've heard from, I've been told by a friend of mine who's a science fiction editor in France that Van Vogt is way and above the most popular science fiction author in France. And he definitely has a large following. Of course, so do the other people I've named, but somehow it doesn't translate itself into magazine sales.
That, of course, is
Fred Pohl.
That's right, who is a fine person as well as a damn good editor and writer.
Wow, I've just been so impressed by him. I think he's getting to be, he's just hitting his stride, He's just getting to be a better and better writer. All that Gateway stuff is just super.
Yeah, the Ichi,
yeah. Yeah, just super stuff. And as you say, certainly a real nice man, a genuine gentleman.
Bert, skip the next 2 bands. Go to band 17. Band 17. You just finished 14. And meanwhile, while he's doing that, I will tell you that this is KPFK in Los Angeles. And it'll be better late than never.
Write it down, yeah.
Gravestone. And this is hour 20. Well, never mind.
Okay.
And this is hour 25. We are sort of giving you little bits or bites or patches of prior guests on the show. And we are now up to 1974.
Oh, this is out. This is his
roughly
story, roughly chronological.
Roughly, yeah. And I want to again plug our resident archivist Eric Foss.
Oh yes, do that.
Who sent a lot of these tapes, and we just dubbed them off. And well, on this band alone,
without Eric Foss, most of this stuff would not be possible to do.
Without Eric Foss, it would probably be lost.
Yeah.
And we have 33 bands here, plus these 2 cassettes we'll get to in a while.
Mm-hmm.
But, I mean, we got a hell of a lot of names here. Silverberg, Haldeman, Gunn, Walheim, Harrison, McCaffrey, Heinlein, Phil Dick, Ben Bova, Fred Pohl, Ray Bradbury, Fritz Leiber, Jack Williamson, Randall Garrett, Asimov, Michael Moorcock. Yeah,
what does he sound like? He sounds like he's from New York.
We'll play that one later on, as a matter of fact.
New York?
That is not one that was done originally here.
No.
There was a fellow whose name I cannot recall, who ran a store down in Orange County who did interviews with authors, and he gave me one of these to play. And this one happens.
Is that the guy that sold the tapes?
Yeah, Asimov. I can't. It's embarrassing because I produced some of those.
Hourglass tapes?
Yes.
What was his name? Him and his wife.
And his wife. That's right.
He and his wife. The 2 of them. I don't remember either.
Anyway, Asimov tells a story about how he came to write Nightfall. Okay, so we have a lot of names here. And then coming up, Douglas Adams, Norman Spinrad, Arthur C. Clarke, Jerry Pornell, Pohl Anderson, and a few others. Just the little guys.
Just the little guys, yeah I was going to say.
Mm-hmm. All right. We're going to do a small section now, at least 2 writers, on how I write. Okay, so it shouldn't take you very long. In fact, I expect you to get this name before the first sentence is complete.
Okay.
Bert, roll it.
I think I've always liked the spoken word, and that's the way I write. I mean, I write certainly for the voice as much as for the eye, and I think that comes partly from the having this acting background, being the child of actors, and so I do tend to always to think of how it will sound, and I tend to write rather slowly as a result of that. It's putting together prose is, well, with me, it's almost like putting together poetry. I mean, it's sort of a lot of weighing of the words as I write, and if I do as much as 500 or 1,000 words a day, why, that's a very satisfactory output for me. And so I've always liked that side of it.
How do you work? Is it first a plot? Is it an idea? Is it a mood? Or does it vary from story to story?
It varies from story to story, but if there's anything, I mean, I like to get the plot together before I start writing. But then if the story is working, why, one generally gets the impulse to change it as one is writing it. I mean, because the thing about writing is that it's living through the story. I mean, you can plan a story and alter it and make elaborate outlines. But then, at least for me, when I start to write it, why, then it's then I am living through the events. I think I think of myself as being the actor there. That's very much something I got from the stage, and the feeling of getting into character and really experiencing the things that are happening in the story. In the preliminary stages, I'm just talking about these things with myself, but when I write the story, why, then I am trying to experience them as intensely as I can, and sort of asking myself, how do I feel about all this? I mean, how does it hit me? How am I reacting in the various characters of the story? And especially, of course, in the first-person story, why, then it's very intense, because you are just one individual for the most part and going through it.
He got it. He got it. You can't miss that voice.
No, there's only. It's a very tall person with white hair.
Fritz Leiber.
It's Fritz
yes.
Leiber. Yeah.
And by the way, I will recommend. I did I wrote a review of Ghostlight, his new story, and sort of which. Let me try this again. Blue Jay Books. Jim Frankel has put out a new collection of Leiber. There's an original story called The Ghostlight, which the book is titled. There's also Space Time for Springers and Rolled M Bones and a couple of other classic Leiber stories. And an excerpt from his autobiography. Very interesting. And I was able to write a good review of it. That is to say, the review may not have been good, but it had good, positive things to say about Leiber. And if you see that in the bookstores, you might pick it up. If you want a crash course in one of the best fantasists in the field, that's a good place to start. All right, now, that's one example of how I write. Now we're going to go back to a writer whom we have heard before.
Yeah.
Philip K. Dick.
Yeah.
And this is how he writes.
First thing is the idea, which is a pure idea. And the next thing is the characters who will be confronted by an environment based on the idea. That is, you create an environment which is a kind of a special effects mock-up of an idea. You translate it from an idea into a world, but then you have to have the people who must live in that world. And if my books all have a consistency, it's because my ideas interact with each other. And I always try to find somebody who's the victim of the idea and somebody who is the master of the idea. So you have a bifurcated society always, with the loser, and the winner. Somebody's going to make it off the idea, and somebody's going to be victimized by the idea. We just take, make one up. Suppose we use pretzels for money, for example. All the people who own bakeries, would probably, instead of a president, we'd have it, the chief baker. See what I mean? And then there's another guy who has a dietary deficiency, and he's got to eat pretzels or he'll die. You see, and so whenever he's paid off at the end of the month, he has to eat the pretzels instead of using them to buy things with. So I'm making them go on. So they give him his month's pay, and it's in a paper sack. See, a little white paper bag, like you get pretzels in, and he eats the pretzels on the way home, and then realizes, now he can't pay any of his bills. But his system requires the salt and the pretzels or something like that.
That's Philip K. Dick. All right, Bert, back it up a cut. The sequence from A Scanner Darkly, just before that. When we did the tape, apparently it was toward the end. It was running slow. You noticed? Yeah.
Pretty strange.
But Bert Handelsman, our crack engineer, I don't know what happened, but later on there's a sequence. Well, I just had to throw it away. It was really. I'm sorry because I don't want to lose a word of Phil Dick. But anyway, that's how he does it. He just takes the two opposites and.
I'm reading a book of his at the moment.
Which one?
It's got to be a real minor piece of work, but it's called Our Friends from
Froelic's 8. Yes.
Is that not minor?
Well, there are those who say he doesn't write minor.
Ah, that could be.
Let's see.
But
that's
huh?
I'm just trying to remember. They're bringing out a new edition of.
Oh, are they?
Yeah.
This is oddly enough a hardcover Ace book. I don't know if it's the same Ace that does the paperbacks, but it says Ace Books, and it's a hardcover. And it's got a real strange cover on it. It's about, let's see, there's the new men, the unusuals, and the old men. The old men meaning regular folks. And the new men who've got new kinds of physics and a new kind of math. And the unusuals who can read minds. And he's got this society where it's changing over from the old men to the new men and the unusuals. And there's a lot of anger and pain going on there. So I can see what he's saying. I mean, who will benefit and who will not. It really shows up in this book in particular.
When Bert and I interviewed him, which was when, 76, wasn't it, Bert?
Oh, Bert interviewed him? Yeah.
Well, Bert was the engineer, and he had some stuff that led into questions, as I recall.
Yeah.
I don't think your voice is on the tape, but off. Bert was on the case. He was a damn good participant.
He knows some stuff. Bert
anyway,
knows some stuff.
He had I think it was just about to be published, A Scanner Darkly, and he really wanted to read this sequence. And so he did. It's the suicide sequence, and it's from A Scanner Darkly.
Charles Frech, becoming progressively more and more depressed by what was happening to everyone he knew, decided finally to off himself. There was no problem in the circles where he hung out in putting an end to yourself. You just bought into a large quantity of reds and took them with some cheap wine late at night with the phone off the hook so that no one could interrupt you. The planning part had to do with the artifacts you wanted found on you by later archaeologists, so they'd know from which stratum you came, and also could piece together where your head had been at the time you did it. He spent several days deciding on the artifacts, much longer than he had spent deciding to kill himself, and approximately the same time required to get that many reds. He would be found lying on his back, on his bed, with a copy of Ayn Rand's The Fountainhead, which would prove he had been a misunderstood Superman rejected by the masses, and so in a sense murdered by their scorn, and an unfinished letter to Exxon protesting the cancellation of his gas credit card. That way he could indict the system and achieve something by his death over and above what the death itself achieved. Actually, he was not as sure in his mind what the death achieved as what the artifacts achieved, but anyhow it all added up, and began to make ready like an animal sensing its time had come and acting out its instinctive programming laid down and was near. At the last moment, as end time closed in on him, he changed his mind on a decisive issue and decided to drink the reds down with a connoisseur wine instead of Ripple or Thunderbird. So he set off on one last drive over to Trader Joe's, which specialized in fine wines, and bought a bottle of 1971 Mondavi Cabernet Sauvignon, which set him back almost $30, all he had. Back home again, he uncorked the wine, let it breathe, drank a few glasses of it, spent a few minutes contemplating his favorite page of the illustrated picture book of sex, which showed the girl on top, then placed the baggie of reds beside his bed, lay down with the Ayn Rand book, an unfinished protest letter to Exxon, tried to think of something meaningful but could not, although it kept remembering the girl being on top, and then with a glass of the Cabernet Sauvignon gulped down all the reds at once. After that, the deed being done, he lay back, the Ayn Rand book and letter on his chest, and waited. However, he had been burned. The capsules were not barbiturates as represented. They were some kind of kinky psychedelics, of a type he had never dropped before, probably a mixture new on the market. Instead of quietly suffocating, Charles Frech began to hallucinate. Well, he thought philosophically, this is the story of my life, always ripped off. He had to face the fact, considering how many of the capsules he swallowed, he was in for some trip. Next thing he knew, a creature from between dimensions was standing beside his bed, looking down at him disapprovingly. The creature had many eyes all over it, ultra-modern, expensive-looking clothing, and rose up 8 feet high. Also, it carried an enormous scroll. "You're going to read me my sins," Charles Frech said. The creature nodded and unsealed the scroll. Frech said, lying helpless on his bed, "It's going to take 100,000 hours." Fixing its many compound eyes on him, the creature from between dimensions said, "We are no longer in the mundane universe. Lower plane categories of material existence such as space and time no longer apply to you. You have been elevated to the transcendental realm. Your sins will be read to you ceaselessly in shifts throughout eternity. The list will never end." Know your dealer, Charles Frech thought, and wished he could take back the last half hour of his life. 1,000 years later, he was still lying there on his bed with the Ayn Rand book and letter to Exxon on his chest, listening to them read his sins to him. They had gotten up to the 1st grade when he was 6 years old. 10,000 years later, they had reached the 6th grade, the year he had discovered masturbation. He shut his eyes, but he could still see the multi-eyed, 8-foot-high being with its endless scroll reading on and on. And next, it was saying, Charles Frech thought, "At least I got a good wine."
That's pretty bizarre. Can you do that on the radio? What book's that from?
That's from A Scanner Darkly.
A Scanner Darkly. That's pretty.
Do you have a copy of that? I will loan you one if you don't.